Alright guys, and welcome back to the channel, and today I will be giving you my full predictions for UFC 301 this Saturday, live from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and I absolutely cannot wait to get into it. I did pretty damn well on UFC 300. I went 9-4, but technically should have gone 10-2. And if it weren't for Jalen Turner making the biggest mistake of his life and walking away from Moicano after he dropped him, assuming the fight was over, and he had followed up and finished him and let the ref step in, I would have gotten that fight perfect. So it was incredibly infuriating to watch Turner drop Moicano, turn his back without the ref stepping in, which you never do. You do not stop fighting until the ref stops you. So that absolutely cost me a perfect pick. And then in the Jessica Andrade and Mariana Rodriguez fight, I was cruising to getting that perfect. And then Mariana, after controlling the majority of the fight in the rounds with the better striking like I predicted, keeping it on the outside, popping Jessica Andrade with the shots down the middle, keeping it nice and crisp while Jessica Andrade rushed in with power hooks like we knew she was going to do. Mariana started to cost herself and give up the rounds at the very end by leaving her chin out and her hands down and letting Jessica rush in with big power hooks, do damage in the last minute, and make the fight unnecessarily close. I thought there was still a case for Mariana to win that fight by decision, but Jessica Andrade rushed in, cracked her with shots, and just barely stole it. So if Mariana had kept her defense up, knowing I need to prepare for a person that's going to rush in with power hooks, and she had kept her hands up and her chin down, she would have won that fight and I would have got it perfect. So outside of those two, I mean, it was a great card. I had 6 perfect predictions, which was fighter, round, and finish. So I still did pretty damn well. But we are going to move right along to UFC 301 here. We're going to cruise through these early prelims and then try to get to that main card. And I won't hold you guys too long. But in the very first fight of the night, we have Alessandro Costa versus Kevin Borjas. Very interesting stand-up fight. Both of them have very good, stand-up aspects. Alessandro Costa has a lot of TKO finishes, a few loss. Borjas has a very solid record. Very tough fight. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but I did like what I saw on Alessandro's record. A few more finishes, a little bit more upside there. So in this fight, I think it's going to be tough, but I'm going to go Alessandro Costa by decision. Costa, excuse me. Then we are rolling up to the Bonfim brothers, who have been very impressive in the UFC so far. I mean, the knockout of Terrence McKinney, just the way that these guys fight has been very impressive. Ismail is coming off a loss, but I'm not going to put a whole lot of stock into that because he has still looked very impressive. And he is going up against a very, very seasoned veteran and very old fighter at this point, Vince Pichel, who is 41 years old, still hanging in there in the game. But I think this is going to be a tough fight for Vince Pichel. I want to say that Ismail could finish Vince. He could wind up TKOing him, just outworking him, outstriking him, just putting a beating on him. But I am going to say that Vince Pichel loses these rounds clearly, and even though I want to say Ismail could get this finish, I think Ismail is just going to beat on him and just pretty much outclass him for 3 rounds. He could get a sub-finish, but I am going to say Bonfim beats Vince Pichel quite easily on the cards for a easy 30-27. And we are moving on up to Dione Barbosa versus Ernesta Kareckaite. Now, I do not know too much about these women. I think they are both brand new. Neither one of their names sounds super familiar. Maybe Barbosa fought once before in the UFC, and I'm just not remembering it. But out of my research, I like what I am seeing from Dione Barbosa. She is a grappler. She has a little bit more upside on the ground with submission wins. Ernesta Kareckaite, the one thing that I did not like is that she has won the majority of her last few fights by split decision. And when you are winning a lot of fights by split decision, you're not leaving a lot of confidence on the cards. You're not doing enough to clearly take rounds, and that makes me nervous. You're making it close. You're letting your opponent get a little too much offense in, and you're struggling defensively. So I am going to go Dione Barbosa by submission in this fight. I liked what I saw on her record jiu-jitsu-wise. She is coming off an armbar. Arnesta Kareckaite, stand-up fighter, a lot of close split decisions, but I think Barbosa is going to edge her in the grappling and most likely submit her early or take that decision. Moving on up, we are looking at Mauricio Ruffy versus Jamie Mullarkey, and a very interesting fight. Jamie Mullarkey has been around a long time. He's had it rough lately, though. Jamie Mullarkey is starting to kind of hit a wall. He's getting knocked out quite a bit, especially in his last few fights. And from what I have seen of Mauricio Ruffy, he is a very, very good striker standing up. He's got nasty power. He's got good combination shots. And I think this is going to be one of those situations where Mullarkey's looking okay for a little while, hanging in there in the pocket, and then Ruffy is going to catch him with a bomb and knock him out. So even though we don't have a lot on Mauricio Ruffy, he was on Dana White's Contender Series, we don't have a whole lot of background, he doesn't have a lot of UFC fights, I think he has more upside here, and I think he has that power to upset a veteran like Jamie Mullarkey. So we are going Mauricio Ruffy by KO. Next up, we have Joaquim Silva versus Drakkar Klose. Very, very interesting fight. Great matchup. Joaquim Silva, been around a long time, a lot of fights. I think he's pushing about 40 years old. And Drakkar Klose, you know, very solid striker. Kind of up and down here and there, but power in his hands. I do like Drakkar Klose in this fight, however. I think Drakkar Klose just has the youth. He's got the speed. He's got the striking. He's got the power. Joaquim Silva, you know, very solid. Doesn't get finished a whole lot. Hangs in the fight. But I think Drakkar Klose is going to put enough damage on Joaquim Silva to possibly get this finish. If not, he takes the decision 30-27, maybe a 29-28. But I'm leaning 30-27. But I think he is actually going to catch Joaquim Silva with some heavy shots and TKO him. So I like the upside in the power striking from Drakkar Klose and that youth and speed. So Drakkar Klose by second round TKO. Moving on up, we are Gene Silva versus William Gomis, the French fighter. And in this, I like William Gomis with the striking, the movement, the speed. I think he is going to edge that. Gene Silva, pretty solid here. You know, coming off quite a few wins, 12-2 versus William Gomis, 13-2. But I like the height. I like the reach advantage for William Gomis. And I think he's just going to take this on the cards. 30-27, maybe a 29-20 in there. But I think he's going to just take these rounds pretty comfortably. So William Gomis by decision. Flying on up to the next fight, we have Elvis Brener versus Mutabek Orolbai, and a very interesting fight. This could be one of the toughest fights of the night, but there is one thing that is very solid right now, and I am not going to pick against fighters that are from Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, or anything with a stan.
Borat, very nice, great success. We are going to go into the fight and get this for my brother Bilo.
I am just not going to pick against these guys from any kind of Kyrgyzstan because they just are killers. These guys are just naturally great fighters. And I think Mutabek Orolbai looked phenomenal against Uros Medic. Just came out, submitted him, neck cranked him, and I think that is what he is going to do here. He's going to get Elvis Brener down. It could be back and forth for about a round or two, but I think somewhere in that second round, Mutabek is going to get him down and just crank him and get that sub. So I'm very confident in that one, and he is going to continue to kind of streak. Moving on, we are up at the longtime veteran Karolina Kowalkiewicz versus Jasmine Lucindo. And this is a very tough fight because this is a seasoned vet who's been around a very long time, has a lot of fights in the UFC, versus a very young and up-and-coming prospect. And in fights where you have a young fighter coming in against a seasoned vet, a lot of times the seasoned veteran will just come out, show the levels, put a beating on that young veteran like Donald Cowboy Cerrone did to Alex Hernandez. Alex Hernandez thought he was going to come in, steamroll Cerrone, talked a lot of shit, and Cerrone beat the shit out of him. Now, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, on the other hand, is coming off 3 wins. She had a rough start a few years ago. Well, not rough start, but a rough patch a few years ago where she was losing a lot of fights in a row. It looked like the end of her career, and then she kind of had a resurgence, and she's been coming back and comfortably winning. And this is a tough fight because all that experience, all that, all that knowledge that she has from being in the UFC could be a big problem for Yasmin Lucindo as this fight goes. But I am actually going to side with Lucindo in this one, even though she's so young. She's got the skill, she's got the jiu-jitsu, she's got the striking. She trains with Amanda Nunes in her off time. And I think that edge in youth and speed is most likely going to get this done. And I see her getting Carolina down, kind of dominating her on the ground, and I think she's going to get that submission. If she doesn't get the submission, I could see her squeaking out a real close split 29-28, but I think she might be a little too much for Carolina. But if she cannot get Carolina down and dominate her and comfortably control her, I see Carolina just outstriking her on the feet and taking the decision and showing the levels in that veteran status. But I am going to side with Yasmin Lucindo to get this submission. Moving on, we are looking at Jack Tank Shore versus Joe Anderson Brito, and this is a very tough fight. Joe Anderson Brito has just looked like a monster, in his last few fights. Very well-rounded, great striking, great jiu-jitsu. Jack is coming off a win, and then before that, he had a loss against Ricky Simone. And even though he does have a loss in the last two, I think Jack Shore can possibly get back on track here, but this is a very tough fight against a very well-rounded and dangerous Brazilian. I mean, Joe Anderson Brito could easily hurt him, rock him, grab a neck, knock him out. But I'm going to say that Jack Shore gets back on track. He gets the grappling going. He is able to control Joe Anderson Brito, get him down, and take a decision win here. But if Jack Shore is not careful in this fight, Joe Anderson could easily wind up rocking him, hurting him, submitting him, and he could take another loss like he did against Ricky Simone. It's a very tough fight. I almost went Joe Anderson Brito, and I'm not counting him out, but I'm going to say Jack Shore winds up getting that win and moving on. Moving on up, we are at Paul Craig versus Caio Pereira, and this is an absolute easy. This is my lock of the night. I am not a Paul Craig fan at all. I do not think Paul Craig is good at all. And Paul Craig, to me, he is one of two ways that his fights go. He either gets his ass beat and he gets completely dominated, completely outclassed on the feet, gets dominated on the ground and just loses, or he gets his ass beat, gets outstruck on the feet, gets beat on the ground, but then he pulls a submission out of his ass. Just at the last second, getting completely dominated and just pulls a miracle win out. And it's just amazing that he keeps, just being able to pull these wins out when he's clearly getting just outclassed everywhere. He's not good on the feet. His striking is awful on the feet. He's slow. He's clunky. His defense is poor. And he's only really good off his back. When it comes to grabbing these last-second submissions, he's not ever really on top. He doesn't really look good on top. And he'll just throw up, a triangle like against Nikita Krylov and just catch people. So he has that opportunity to catch people in traps. But Caio Borralho has been an absolute monster lately. He is just taking guys down, dominating them, showing that strength, showing that better Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I don't see Paul Craig pulling this off at all. If Paul Craig pulls this win out, I'll be absolutely stunned. I think Caio Borralho is going to come out, piece him up on the feet, take him down, and just dominate him on the floor. He could possibly submit Paul Craig, but I think he easily beats Paul Craig to a 30-27 on the cards, and it's not even close. So, sorry, Paul Craig. I think it's going to be a bad night for you. Moving on. We are looking at Michel Pereira versus Ior Potieria. And a very interesting fight, but I think this is an easy fight. I think Michel Pereira easily beats Ior Potieria. He has not looked very good in his UFC run so far, Potieria. He did get a win in his last fight, gutted it out, toughed it out, looked pretty decent, but I think Michel Pereira is an absolute dynamic nightmare. He looked, against Michael Oleksiejczak, coming out, submitting him with the standing choke. He's explosive, he's dangerous, he's just fireworks, and I think he is going to put a pace on Eor Potieria, and I think he's going to wind up finishing him, catch him with some nasty shots, and TKO him. And Potieria is just kind of slow, and I think that's going to be a bad clash with the explosiveness of Michel Pereira's style. So I see Michel Pereira just kind of piecing Potieria up and finishing him. Moving on, we are looking at Anthony Lionheart Smith versus Vitor Petrino. And again, another easy fight. I think Vitor Petrino is going to beat the shit out of Anthony Smith. And I like Anthony Smith. You know, he's a veteran. He's been around a while. He's had some good wins, but he is just hitting a wall. He is struggling in fights. He's getting beat up badly. I mean, Glover Teixeira beat the shit out of him, just dominated him, knocked his teeth out. Then in his last fight, Khalil Roundtree rocking him, hurting him bad. And Petrino has that size and that power to do that. And I think he's going to wind up just beating Anthony Smith up here. So I see Vitor Petrino getting a knockout in the second round on Anthony Smith. And sorry, Anthony, I know you don't want to be the stepping stone of the division and you want to prove a point against these younger guys, but these younger guys are good, and a lot of them are going to whip your ass. And that's what I see happening here. So we are moving on to our co-main event and our main event. And in the co-main event here, we have the return of the King of Rio, Jose Aldo, going up against Jonathan Martinez, and this is an absolute awesome matchup. Such similar styles between the two. I mean, Jonathan Martinez, very heavy with those leg kicks. Some of the nastiest leg kicks in the UFC right now. I mean, Barbosa level leg kicks. Absolutely destroyed Adrian Yanez's leg. I mean, just tore through it like a chainsaw. This kid is good. He's got great defense. He's got great striking, and he's very good with the leg kicks. But as we know, Jose Aldo is the original king of leg kicks. I mean, tearing up Uriah Faber, tearing people up with those leg kicks. But Jose Aldo has been gone from the UFC for a few years. He went off and did some boxing, and now he's back. But Aldo is older, and I think he is going to struggle in this fight against the younger, faster, hungrier Jonathan Martinez. Now, could Aldo come in and just look better than ever and just dominate and close the distance on Martinez and just light him up and just pull off this incredible comeback win after a few years? Yes, he could. But I just don't see it. I think Jonathan Martinez is that good. I think he's a problem, and I think he is going to out-edge Aldo in the speed, the kicks, the defensive movement, and I think Jonathan Martinez gets this done by decision. I think it could be really close. It could be a close split decision, and you're going, 29-28 Aldo, 29-28 Martinez, and then it's right there on the scorecards, and you think, oh shit, maybe it goes to Aldo. No, Martinez. Or it goes to Aldo, and the crowd goes nuts. It could be one of those fights, but I think Martinez has the skill to out-edge Aldo here. So Jonathan Martinez by decision. Moving on, we are at the main event, and man, this is a tricky fight, and I will say, Steve Erceg getting this title shot is absolutely crazy. Never saw it coming. I couldn't believe it when it was announced. But Steve Erceg right now is ranked number 10 in the flyweight division, and he literally leap-pad jumped over the top 10 to get this title shot. And yes, there were a lot of guys in the top 10 that had fights already booked, but there were a few in there that could have fought Erceg and given him a top 10 test before he got thrown into the fire of a title shot. I believe at the time this fight was made, Muhammad Makayev was available. There were like 2 other guys that he could have fought. So I was like, how in the world did they let him jump from 10 to title shot off of a knockout shot on Matt Schnell? And nothing against Matt Schnell, but Matt Schnell's not saying a whole lot when it comes to the top 10 elite. So Steve Erceg has looked very impressive. He's looked very good, very sharp, and he's going up against a killer in Alexander Pantoja. And I went back and forth on this, and a part of me was like, man, I could see Steve Erceg just sitting back, being calm, being tactical, picking his shots, landing a hook, landing a bomb on Pantoja, hurting him, and pulling off this upset in Rio de Janeiro. I mean, we've seen so many crazy upsets in the last year with Strickland and Izzy and O'Malley and Sterling, and I mean, so many wild things. But the more I sat on it, I'm like, man, I think this is too much too soon. This is a big, big jump, and we really needed to see him fight another top 10 contender to get an idea of where he's going to be at in this fight. And I think Pantoja is just going to be too well-rounded. I think he's going to set a pace. He's going to have the grappling edge. He's going to have the striking, and I think the grappling is going to make the biggest difference in this fight. I see Pantoja mixing it up, taking him down, holding him on the ground, going for submission attempts, and I think he's going to win a lot of these rounds on control. But if Pantoja is not careful on the feet, he could get caught with a bomb and get knocked out for this massive upset in Rio de Janeiro, and Steve Erceg walks out of there with the belt. And, I mean, the most unlikely underdog of the year, jumping from 10 to title shot. So, even though I think Erceg has a good chance here to do something wild, I think Pantoja is going to be a little too much for him. It's too soon for Erceg, and I see Pantoja taking this on the scorecards for a decision and just showing Erceg, man, maybe down the road you come back, you get a rematch, you know, you get another title shot, you do better, but this is too much too soon. They tossed you way from 10 into the fire, and I think Pantoja is going to show that experience and get that win by decision. Thank you all so much for checking out these predictions. If you like these predictions, please leave a like and subscribe. It massively helps out my channel, and I cannot wait to see you all for the predictions for UFC 302. Take care, and I'll see you then.